Dr. Manal Hajali. She is the representative of the Foreign Affairs Office of the Spiritual Leader, and for the Jews is Sueda Hekmeh Hajar. Go ahead, Doctor.
Good morning, everyone. I stand before you today as the voice of Jewish people wounded but unbroken, people who have forced genocide but yet refuse to surrender their dignity. The Jews are a distinct ethno-religious community who lived side by side with Muslims, Christians, and others for over 1,000 years. We have preserved our faith and traditions while embracing coexistence, dignity, and freedom of belief. Perhaps some people never heard of Jews before the last few months. That is because we're peaceful people who have never attacked others, never sought to dominate, and never aspired to create our own state. Wherever Jews have lived, we have been loyal to the communities we call home, contributing as good citizens, neighbors, and defenders of peace. In Syria, Jews primarily concentrated in the southern province of Sueda. In July 2025, as Sueda, our Jews' homeland, was turned into a place of horror, what happened was not a battle, not a clash, but a massacre. Innocent men, women, and children were slaughtered in their own homes. Government forces stormed the Jews' villages not to protect us, but to destroy us. They looted everything they could load into trucks. They set houses on fire. They murdered the elderly, women, and children, displacing entire families. More than 140,000 people were forced to flee, abandoning everything in a desperate search for safety and survival. Even the hospital, the one place that should have been safe, became a killing ground. Government forces entered the hospital and carried out a mass execution inside the hospital itself. Patients were slaughtered in their beds, health workers became targets, the sick and the wounded were not spared. In other parts of the city, families were burned alive, others executed in cold blood. I cannot speak in general terms alone, because the pain has names, faces, and stories. My own neighbor, Manal, a respected attorney, was burned to death in her home, together with her husband and her kids. And why? Just because they were Jews. Tala, a little girl, watched her parents be murdered before her eyes. Then she was forced to step over their blood, carrying a trauma no child should ever suffer. Hussam, a young American citizen from Oklahoma, was executed alongside his father, brother, uncles, and cousins. And why? Again, simply just because they were Jews. In Sueda, the Druze were not alone in this pain. Our Christian neighbors, they experienced the same suffering. Rita, a 22-year-old young woman, became the sole survivor of her family. She watched as 12 of her loved ones were massacred in front of her. Injured and bleeding, she survived only by laying still for hours under the corpses of her family until the terrorists finally left her home, then she sought help. Rita's survival is a miracle, but it's also a haunting reminder of the barbarities that minorities in Syria face simply because of who they are. These are not isolated tragedies. People are decapitated, families wiped out, villages turned into graveyards, many women were raped and then killed, and these are real stories, by the way, known to us. However, they are being handled with extreme confidentiality due to the sensitivity of this matter. As of today, 37 villages in Sueda are almost completely burned to the ground. Over 20,000 homes were looted and torched, with the stolen goods openly sold in the markets of the neighboring province under the eye of the government itself. Unlike the coastal massacres earlier this year where evidence was buried, Sueda still stands as a living courtroom with evidence. It's a prime example of barbarism that the world cannot ignore. And perhaps the most upsetting wound of all, hundreds of our loved ones remain missing, including women, children, and they were kidnapped into the dark. To this day, not a single word, not a single answer from the government. We do not even know if they are alive, tortured, or they already have been thrown into unmarked graves. And who did all of this to Sueda and to Druze? These atrocities were carried out by the government forces, working hand in hand with extremists who embrace ISIS ideology and openly justify killing minorities. And now the world dares to tell us that we must accept as a political leader the man whose hands are soaked in blood, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani. Let me absolutely be clear. Al-Jawlani is a terrorist. Putting on a suit does not slight his crimes. Smiling does not erase his past. He fought with Al-Qaeda. He fought with ISIS. He supported groups that murdered innocents and executed Americans on camera to terrify the world. Let's not forget the American journalist James Foley, who in 2014 was kidnapped and beheaded to become the first American citizen murdered by ISIS. This is not just a Jewish story. This is an American story. An American citizen was executed. An American journalist was murdered by Giuliani's network. And today, American politicians shake their hands and grant him legitimacy? How can that be? To grant a Giuliani legitimacy is to betray not only the Jewish people, but the memory of every American soldier who gave their life fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Is to betray the victims of 9/11. How can the United States in the month of September, when it mourns the thousands killed in terrorist attacks, even consider welcoming this man to walk into streets and to speak in the United Nations? How can the international community shake the hands of a man who embodies the same ideology that murdered thousands? And when just 2 days ago, the New York Post published an article, and it stated, quote, "To see a man with sharp past standing in Manhattan welcomed under a banner of diplomacy is not just a question of foreign policy, but it's a matter of moral clarity," end quote. My people do not ask for revenge. We ask for life, for justice, for peace. To this day, Sweden is still under siege. Food, water, medical supplies, even power, none are guaranteed. Hospitals are overwhelmed with no supplies left to heal the sick or save the dying. Humanitarian aid convoys are blocked, turned back at checkpoints, leaving only a fated triple that is never enough to sustain life. Even our education is under attack. Families whose homes were burned now sleep in classrooms, leaving children without schools. Sweden has no universities, and those who try to leave to study, they risk being kidnapped or worse, killed at the checkpoints. Our students are trapped and stripped of education and even their future. This siege is not only meant to starve us, but to erase our next generation. This is not war. This is a slow planned death. This is ethnic cleansing of the Druze. And as if the killing is not enough, the government buried the truth, controlling the media. They painted the Druze, the victims, as the aggressors. They broadcast lies to justify our slaughter. Calling for jihad against us as if the murder of the innocents could ever be holy. They opened the gates to extremists, pulling fighters from across the region, arming them with the propaganda as much as with guns. With state-controlled media as their weapon, they bury the truth under headlines and false reports, turning killers into heroes and the victims into villains. And yet, while this cold, Freudian government tries to frame these atrocities as sectarian clashes or claims that some of the fighters acted beyond its control, the absolute truth, proven by recordings and testimonies, is that the Syrian interim president and his government are the masterminds. Since December alone, many massacres, as you know, have happened. They rewrote the constitution, not to bring democracy, but to ensure minorities have no right, no voice, no representation in the new Syria. They changed the educational curriculum to prompt children with the radical Salafi jihadi agendas. Today, on behalf of the Foreign Affairs Office of this virtual leadership of Druze in Sweden, as well as all other organizations of Druze who stand with us in unity, we demand for the immediate lifting of the brutal siege that is starving Sweden into silence. We demand the safe release of our kidnapped children, mothers, and sisters. And yes, we demand autonomy, because only self-rule can guarantee us that the tragedy of July 2025 can never happen again. After July 2025 genocide, the Druze community has every right to demand autonomy. When a state fails to protect its people and instead abandons them for massacre, the only path to survival is self-ruling. We refuse to be associated with a radical government or extremist forces. that deny the rights of minorities. We reject any rule that thrives on fear, exclusion, and silencing all the voices. Our struggle is not for domination, but for protection. Protection of life, culture, faith, and the protection of the right of every community to exist in peace. We will not stand under a banner that erases us. For this reason, we insist on our right to self-rule, to govern our own affairs in a way that guarantees safety, dignity, and coexistence. Autonomy is not separatism. It's a guarantee of safety, dignity, and stability of the Druze and all minorities who have been left to face massacre alone. The world has a choice today. It can turn its back on us and pretend not to see us, allowing terrorists to wear suits and become leaders, or it can stand with truth, justice, and with humanity. If the world does not stand with us today, history will remember not only the crimes that have been committed, but the silence of the international community and those who had the power to act. Our message is simple. Genocide happened. Our people are still suffering, and Julani is a terrorist. Sweden needs peace, freedom for our kidnapped, and autonomy survive. God bless all minorities and God bless America. Thank you.